Hey guys, so it's a good chance you're stuck at home these days and you might be bored looking for something new to learn. If you know anything about me and Jason, then you know that we both have pretty eclectic tastes. Although we love the metal, we also have a background of classical training and we love folk music and jazz too. So, if you're not familiar with it, as much as I'm sure you love everything metal, um, classical guitar and classical vocal technique can do a lot for you as far as your expanding your lyricism and classical guitar can really expand your knowledge of chords and also your approach to melody and lead technique. But one thing that can really help your chordal progression and composition is jazz. Sometimes in metal you really want a dirty chord. Jazz may not help you so much there, but you'd be surprised. A lot of times you do find the dissonance playing into the harmony. But jazz is very unique in the significance of connecting chords. And so jazz is famous for different turns or certain progressions that can kind of keep the motion going and expanding into and throughout different tonalities. I wanted to share a technique with you today that might help you if you are wanting to expand your familiarity with jazz a little bit. But I tell you, man, if you want to study classical and jazz, it will enhance your musicianship. But just like anything that promises great reward, it takes a lot of hard work and practice. Just like learning any chops or sweeps or whatever on in metal, a lot of that being influenced by classical. So if you're serious about learning jazz, well, that's a big commitment, and it's going to take a lot of time and effort, as the jazz musicians say, time in the tool shed studying your chops. Nevertheless, there are some tricks, some things that can help you experience the reward and the payoff of jazz without necessarily doing all the work up front, though hopefully the point would be to encourage you to go do some of that work later. And I want to show you one of those rewarding tricks, if you will. When I first was exposed to this, mind blown, I was like, wow, this is so cool. Now, I am familiar with the theory behind it, and if you're interested, I'll give you a little bit about that, but you don't really have to know the theory to enjoy this technique. For those of you who do want to know a little more about the theory, all music is built around a tonal center, and we call that the tonality, tonicity, or the key. For example, a major or minor key, C major, C minor, for example. And our keys have a scale, usually a scale associated with them, although you might be able to manipulate scales to what we call modes, take certain scales in and out of that tonal area. And jazz is all about taking the music, letting it kind of evolve from one tonal area to another, and then maybe back to where you started. So for what it's worth, just because it might be helpful in a moment, the average scale, major or minor, and other modes based off of those basic ideas have 7 steps plus an eighth, which we call the octave. And the octave just means that you've come back to the what sounds like the note you started on. It's the same sound at a faster frequency. So it sounds similar, although it's not technically the same note. It basically sounds like the same note higher. And so a scale, for example, a C major scale, would have 7 degrees, and then the octave. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, or 8, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So the reason I tell you that is because your chords, whether you know it or not, are based off of those scale degrees. So if you're in the key of C, C minor, or C major, that's your 1 chord. And it might be a minor 1 or a major 1, but it's 1. So in a moment when I use 2 or 4 or 5, those kind of things, I'm talking about the scale position. So for example, in the key of C, C would be 1. So that'd be the 1 chord. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, right? So C would be 1, D would be 2, C, D, E, F, G, G would be 5, F would be 4. You get the idea. Now, why this is significant is because a lot of your chords will follow certain patterns, and some of those patterns are unique, although they are shared by any genre. Some of them are unique to certain genres. For example, in old school blues and old school rock and old school country, you have the famous 12-bar blues, which is basically a 1, a 4, a 1, 5, 4, 1. If you want to write a pop song, whether it's pop rock or just I guess mainstream top 40 or whatever, what seems to really sell are what they call the 4-chord songs. And if you've never checked out the 4-chord song, go check it out. It's pretty cool. But that's basically the 4-chord formula is 1, 5, 6, 4. So if you're in the key of C major, C would be your 1, C, D, E, F, G. So you go from a C to a G, up to an A, the 6th chord, down to an F, the 4. 1, 5, C, D, E, F, G, up to an A, which would be the 6, down to a 4. And you might already hear glycerine is actually several things. Can you feel the love tonight? When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me. Again, check out the song, pretty cool. It shows up in folk music, shows up in classical, that one actually. So chord progressions are things that can take you pretty far in your songwriting. Well, to do the technique I'm going to show you, you don't really have to know this chord progression, but just so you know, a common chord progression in jazz music is a 2 to 5 to 1. Okay, so if you're in the key of C, then your 2 would be a D. And then your 5, we said earlier, would be a G. Back to your 1. 2. I want to show you a really cool technique, even if you're not into jazz, a really cool 2-5-1 technique that can really plane around well on your fretboard. And if you're just bored or you want to sound like you maybe know more than you do, it's a pretty cool technique. So there are a couple of ways to go about this. Like I said, you can really, if you know your key, you can just find the 2 chord, the 5 chord, and the 1. But the way I'm going to show you to position this is to, and I'm not really using a pick, but you can figure out how to manipulate it without the pick. And honestly, there are ways to include the A string here, but for the most part, I'm going to be skipping it, just using the low E, the D, and the G, okay? So it really doesn't matter what fret you're in. That's the whole beauty of what I'm about to show you. In whatever fret you choose, hold down the low E with your index, and then with your middle and ring finger, skip the A, and in the same fret, hold down the D and the G. Okay? And you can play it all at once if you want to, or you can hit the bass and then bring out the rest. leave your ring finger and use your middle finger to move to the A string and press it down, and pull your pointer finger to the fret just below and play the D string. So here's what I did the first, and I happen to be playing in the 5th fret, so top string, skip the A, then D in the same fret, and the G string in the same fret. Then what I'm going to do is leave my G string pressed down in that fret. I'm going to add my pointer in the fret just below, and my middle finger in the original fret on the A string. And on this one I'm not playing the low E. My bass note becomes the A string. So I went from now here I'm going to move my originally my pointer started on this fret from my initial position. I'm just moving 2 frets down. And this would be, if I were to play the whole chord, and you could play the full chord, this would be a good old major chord. Okay. But I'm actually going to leave out the 5th right here. So you may not like the fingering, but since I'm leaving out the 5th, I'm just going to get rid of the pinky here and play it like that. So I've got, I started here in my initial chord. Now my pointer has gone down 2 frets from the initial. You'll notice that my ring finger has shifted. So from the initial 2 chords, I have moved my ring finger up, and I've actually pulled my middle finger down. If you know how to play a good old major chord, so I'm basically hitting these 2, the major third and the octave. Okay. All right, so here's the, and those are the 3. Now here is the cool thing. That's the basic 2-5-1 progression, and you can plane it wherever you want. And wherever you go, just start the progression again. Really doesn't matter where you decide to go, just commit and follow through. So there, I just split it up. 2, 5, 1. Actually stayed in the same key that time. You can really just jump. I hope maybe you found something in this that you like that will help to ease your boredom while you're stuck at home.